Hey everybody, Scotchman here. So today I'm going to do a tasting of Glenmorangie 10-year-old, the original, and have my Glen glass right here. So I'm just going to pour while I talk a little bit with you. Yeah, give myself a nice pour. Yeah, just about there. So Glenmorangie is a standard in Scotch. It's from the Highlands, and it's a little strange because it's from the Highlands, it's on the coast, but it tastes very much like a Speyside, light, fruity. Normally when you mature your cask on the coast or close to the sea, you'll get a kind of salt in it, a little maritime, but Glenmorangie doesn't have that for whatever reason. It's very, very good Scotch. Now, talking about Scotch, well, we know Scotch comes from Scotland. You know, whiskey comes from anywhere else. Whiskey is any fermented mash of grain. So it could be rye whiskey, it could be corn whiskey, it could be malted barley, which in this instance is Scotch. So normally you'd want to let your Scotch sit for maybe 5 minutes or so. I'm not going to do that tonight because I'm just going to do a quick tasting for you. So I'm going to take you through a sensory evaluation. So what that basically is, we're going to look at the Scotch, we're going to nose the Scotch, we're going to taste the Scotch, and then we're going to see what the finish is like. If you have any questions, let me know, post in the comments, I'll try to answer them. And yeah, let's try to get into it. So Glenmorangie. Nice, it's a very nice nose. Fruity, citrus, light. Really nice. Simple trick, leave your mouth pursed, you'll be able to taste it also. I'm sure you'd have heard me say that before. So the Glenmorangie Distillery in the Highlands, they say that they're the highest stills in Scotland. So what that theoretically means is that the vapors go the highest, so you'll get the lightest, best alcohol being distilled in their two stills. And yeah, Glenmorangie is also one of the first distilleries to start re-racking. So what re-racking means is you mature in your American oak casks or your European oak casks, because for it to be called Scotch, you would have had to mature your freshly distilled whiskey or your cleric in one of those casks, and they can't be brand new casks, they have to be used casks. So they're normally ex-bourbon casks coming from the US, and it has to be distilled in Scotland and matured in Scotland for at least 3 years in those casks for it to be called Scotch. If those requirements aren't met, it can't be called Scotch, it'll be called some other type of whiskey. So Glenmorangie was one of the first distilleries to actually re-rack. So they kind of pioneered it, where they would finish that maturation process for however long and then put it into other casks. So Sauternes cask or port casks or other types of wine casks, just to get that extra complexity or the extra robustness in their Scotches basically. So I've been talking long enough. Still a very nice nose. Let's give it a taste. Good Scotch. So it's nice, kind of caramel sweet tip of your tongue, and then not much pepper, not much spice, very smooth, goes down very nicely. Nice finish. There's no burn, there's just a little spice at the end here, but not bad at all, really quite enjoyable. Nice. So when you're tasting, what you want to do, take a big enough sip, roll it around in your mouth. Make sure to try to coat your whole tongue, top of your tongue, underneath your tongue. So the different parts of your tongue will actually stimulate your taste buds basically, because we can only understand 5 tastes: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. So bitter kind of goes with spicy, umami is really more savory. Everything else based on the parts of your tongue that are stimulated, and then you can get an idea of what you're trying to do. And you always want to try to go through a flavor wheel in your head. So when you're nosing, when you're tasting, is it fruity? Is it floral? Is it grainy? Is it grassy? Is it peaty? Is it winey? Is it woody? Or is it just off? You know, did they get too many aftershots or feints in it before they cut at the heart of the whiskey? So that is distilling. We'll get into that over time, but maybe they made an error. I mean, but really and truly they don't. So most of the established distilleries will have proper people handling this, and I mean, they would have been doing this for years. It's like generation to generation, and know exactly at what point to make the cut and keep the heart of the whiskey and put the rest back into the distilled pot for them to redistill. This is nice. So what I want to do now, actually before I add water, let me just take one more sip. Lovely. So what I'll do now is add a couple drops of water. See, just a little, mix it around a little bit. So what we're drinking is the Glemorangie 10-year-old, the original. So this is basically their entry level to single malt scotch. So what single malt means is that the scotch in this bottle was all distilled from one distillery. So it's one single distillery, it's all malted barley, but what happens is they're varying ages. So because the statement on this bottle is 10 years old, so 10-year-old, that means the youngest whiskey in this bottle has been aged for 10 years old. Doesn't mean the whole bottle is 10 years old, it means the youngest one, is the ratio or the mix or the blend is 10 years old. But all of it was produced from the Glenmorangie Distillery. Also, what you'll find is, if you look at the color, the 10-year-old will tend to be a little lighter. You would expect it to be lighter. You'd expect a 12-year-old or 18-year-old or 15-year-old or 21-year-old to be a little darker, because the coloring that it gets, the scotch gets, really comes from inside of those barrels, sitting in those barrels. That's one of the characteristics that the barrels, the wood in the barrels, put onto your scotch. So when it comes out, it's actually clear. But leaving it in the barrel for longer, you know, that would make it get a little darker. And what you have to be wary of is scotch is made of three things: barley, water, yeast. That's it, nothing else. Very simple ingredients that make this very complex drink that we all love so much. But there's one other ingredient that the Scotch industry is allowed to include, which is a coloring. I think it's E150, but it's a caramel coloring. So you'll find that some distilleries, some of the younger distilleries, or some of those trying experimentation, or some of the non-age statement whiskies, NAS, we'll have one of those, look out for it. They tend to put the caramel in it, because if you're new to purchasing scotch, or you're just looking for a distillery name without trying to do the research to see exactly if coloring was in it or not, you might just look at the bottle and see it looks dark and say, oh, that's really good because it looks dark, so that means it must be old. Not necessarily, because a lot of the non-age statement whiskies don't have an age statement on it. That's what it says, non-age statement. What they will do is they may mix some older whiskey into there, some older scotch into there, but it may also have some grain whiskey in there, like a blended whiskey. Or you may find that they have some, just a little bit of older scotch, mostly young scotch, immature scotch. So maybe some 3-year-old, some 4-year-old, some 5-year-old, maybe even some 7-year-old. But you don't want to buy a bottle thinking darker is better. Alright, so you left the water in for a bit, repeat the process, you know, you're already taking your nose. So because we added water, alcohol burn is gone. I believe it's at 40%, yes, 40% alcohol. So alcohol burn is gone. It's much lighter. You can take a deeper breath, you get some fruity notes. So I would expect in a complex whiskey that once you add that little drop of water, it opens it up. So you get a little more nose, but also you get a little more flavor. It'll be a little more fruity, and any complexities that are in it, you're gonna find it in the second tasting after a little bit of water is added. Not so much fruitiness has come out, a little spicy, a little more honey/caramel, and there's a aftertaste isn't as much spice, but there definitely is more of a kick to it with the water added as opposed to the not water added. Still some very good Scotch, guys and gals. I had a virtual Scotch tasting with this recently actually, and a lot of ladies were in it, and it was nice to see ladies drinking Scotch neat. At least being open to trying it this way, you know. This is good. Alright, so that's it for my tasting of Glenmorangie 10-year-old. Very good entry-level Scotch, very available in Trinidad and Tobago, easy to find anywhere. If you have any questions, comments, post it below, reach out to me, follow me, Scotchman on Instagram, Scotchman TT on Instagram, Scotchman TT on Facebook. And you need glasses, you need Glencairn glasses, anything, give me a call. Thanks again, guys. Look out for the next one. Scotchman signing out. Thanks, guys. Cheers.